listeners. Welcome to Shit That Goes On in Our Heads, the podcast where we normalize conversations around mental health.
That's right. I'm Dirty Skittles, and alongside my amazing co-host, G-Rex, we're here to share real stories and tips from our incredible guests.
Each episode, we deep dive into struggles and triumphs of mental health, offering practical advice and heartfelt support.
Because no one should feel alone in their journey. Join us as we break the stigma and build community of understanding and compassion.
Tune in and let's start talking about the shit that goes on in our heads. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to another episode of Shit That Goes On in Our Heads. Today, we have an amazing guest, Zach. Welcome, Zach, and my amazing co-host, Dirty Skittles.
Hey, welcome, Zach.
Thank you again. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. How's your day?
It just started. Just got done eating some breakfast with the wife and my son. So take this time to do this. And yeah, no, it just started. So I'm happy. It's a great, beautiful Saturday morning here. It's starting to get quite warm, which I don't know. I'm actually one of the opposite of folks with that. Like, I like the cold, but I like the summer, the green and stuff that comes with it. I don't like the heat. I really don't like it.
What was for breakfast?
Pancakes, egg, and bacon.
Do you put anything in your pancakes, like chocolate chips or blueberries?
No, but what I've done since I was a kid, that's a good question, that my dad's done, and it's kind of always stuck with me, and it kind of gave me that extra protein and a little more kick that I needed to kind of hold me up, was I actually put peanut butter on my pancakes.
Ooh, so no syrup?
With syrup. Yeah.
Oh, fancy. I need to try that with my 6-year-old. He's a big, just plain pancake, unless we have blueberries. Then he wants the blueberries. But he does honey. He does not like syrup.
Yeah, I've never had it with honey, but I love honey. So I would imagine I would enjoy it.
Yeah. Peanut butter and honey.
Yeah, he loves peanut butter. I'll do it tomorrow. See how it goes.
Yeah.
We'll report back.
There you go. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yeah. Again, my name is Zachary Van Kuren, 34 years old, married to my wife, Stephanie. We're going to be married now for 8 years in October. I have a soon-to-be 3-year-old. He'll be 3 in 2 weeks from now, June 1st. And I'm expecting another baby boy, and he should be here either last week of June or first week of July. They're saying he'll come out July 4th, but we'll see what happens with that. I know it's maybe
Imagine.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. It's actually one of my favorite holidays. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's kind of me, of my family life in a nutshell. I live in Los Lunas, New Mexico right now, but I'm presumably known to my back history comes from northern New Mexico in Rio Arriba County and Santa Fe as well County. So I'm from up north of New Mexico. Right now, I'm kind of like more central New Mexico, but that's where I'm from, is a little town called Truchas. It's up in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It's the beginning of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, which I want to say, if I know my history correct, I'll put myself on the spot. I think it runs all the way through Colorado, or maybe even all the way to Wyoming. It's the beginning of the Rockies, more or less. So I was very blessed to grow up in the little village I grew up in. It has a lot of rich history and culture, and a lot of my ancestors are from there. And also my early childhood, I was raised in Espanola, New Mexico, which is about 40 minutes west of the little village of Truchas, where I grew up most of my teenage life and young adult life.
Very cool. I have a very random off the wall. What's your favorite childhood memory?
Oh, there's many of them. Let me see. Let me pick one out here. My favorite childhood memories would have to be like what made my business, to be honest, kind of like what I'm doing now, is just spending out the time outdoors with my family, going out fishing with my brother, my friends. We would just go up because we were straight up on the mountain. So we would just go up on summer days when school wasn't happening, of course. And it's really nice because we'd have quads. So we would just go on the quads and the four-wheelers and head up to the creeks and to the springs and things like that. And we'd go fish for the afternoons. And then sometimes it would rain on us, but I mean, we're young, didn't matter. We're out in nature and the wild. So I would say that was probably my favorite memories as a kid. And then, of course, just being with my mom and my dad and my brother when I was a kid at playing sports. I played many sports growing up and doing that kind of stuff. And my dad coached me with a lot of the sports I did when I was a young kid, and just really being a typical millennial, I like to say, before the internet came. Is we were outdoors a lot and playing games and staying out at night until like the light you couldn't see anymore. So
Right.
yeah. So
Street
good
lights
time.
come on.
That's how I grew up. Like we would go out at the very beginning of the day and not come home until mom was calling us. And by that time we were like 5 blocks away on our bikes. Wait, I hear a
Yeah.
faint noise. I think it's time to go home.
I remember us playing hide and go seek in the dark outside.
Absolutely. That's the best.
Yeah. Look forward to as soon as it started to get later on in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you do now? Tell our listeners what you do now.
Oh, I've done many things. My young youth of 34 years, I've done a lot of different things. But what I currently do right now is I run my own business. It's actually again, I'm very family oriented. All you see already. I'm going to kind of bring a little bit more into keep discussing. My dad started raising Nubian goats on his land in 2007. Mom's a true homesteader. So she's, kind of going along with that breakfast again, going with like the syrups. And I was actually really lucky and blessed because my mom would always make homemade jams and syrups out of the fruits that were around the region. But going back to it kind of leads up to what I'm getting to is my dad started reading back then. And then in 2020, of course, we all know what that year brought. So my mom was kind of like just doing her thing. She was having a hobby and she was like, I'm going to make some goat milk soap. So she started making goat milk soap, and I was working for a French cookware company at the time. I had just got done graduating college with a bachelor's of science and exercise science degree. So I was pivoting with 2 jobs. I was a part-time trying to launch my new business. I was a personal trainer / sports performance trainer. So I train a lot of athletes, things like that. Because in my past, I was a football coach in high school, and I really liked that stuff. I loved motivating kids and teaching the youth. And that's what I thought for sure I'd be doing. But things change, and maybe in the future. But that's what I started doing back in early 2010s. And then when 2020 came, like I said, I was trying to launch my business. I was trying to get that going off the ground, but it was like the worst time because, again, people weren't doing anything. They were locked down. They weren't exercising. I couldn't train people. So that kind of fell through. And that was a big struggle for me because I went to school and I was very passionate. And like I knew that was really what I wanted to do. But God had other plans, and his plans are always the best. So my mom calls me one day, and the French cookware store was actually shut down from COVID. And we were just doing backdoor deliveries and online orders at the time. So like nobody was entering the store. And I remember it was a quiet moment. I was just sitting in the back room, and I like to call it my light bulb moment, because when we were in lockdown, I was watching a lot of Shark Tank, and I really wanted to have a business. I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always felt inspired to do that. And they would always consistently say like, hey, you need to have a need, not a want. Like you need to have something essential. And so I was like, well, I would always really overthink about it. And like, well, toilet paper's out of the question. But my mom calls me and says, I made goat milk soap. I didn't think much about it. And then a few weeks later, again, I was in the back room by myself. And then I had my light bulb moment where I was like, wait a minute, we're in a pandemic right now, right? Like, what are people buying more than ever? Soap. What are they like getting more than ever? Toilet paper, soap, and hand sanitizer. And so I just went crazy after that. I made up my mind because the store I was working for, we actually found out probably about a week after that we were actually going to be shutting down that location. So I was going to be out of a job coming that October. So we had like 5 months to sell off what we had in the store. So I was like, just in those 5 months, I was like making a lot of soap with my mom and trying to get the recipe correct and what we wanted in the soap. But also what I did learn was that a lot of the soap we use is just not good. Like it's really bad for us. It has a lot of harmful chemicals in there, a bunch of stuff like PTLates, parabens, nitrates, things like that, and things that are actually hurting our immune system. So when I had my moment, I was like, I looked into researching soap a lot, but I researched that soap was cleaning folks and it was antibacterial, but it was doing a lot more damage to like our skin, and our skin's the largest organ of the body. I mean, so, I was like, well, why are we like hurting our immune systems, and our immune systems are getting weakened? And then we have this pandemic happening right now. So like, why don't we make a soap that does the opposite of that? Like, why don't we make a soap that, cleans, of course, it's soap. And then, of course, like, let's do some other stuff like good things for our skin. Maybe we have oily skin. Well, then we use activated charcoal to kind of draw out some of the toxins in the skin. Maybe we have rosacea or eczema. A lot of people suffer from those things. So I came to find out that goat's milk is actually allergenic. So it's great for sensitive skin and dry skin, and it doesn't have any counteractants to it. So it's really gentle on the skin. And then I used essential oils. So plants that are derived from our earth, because we come from the earth. So it's real big on me. So using what God gave us and being simple with the ingredients. So kind of giving you an idea of my product. But yeah, that's what I do now. I run that business. We're called Milagro Goat Farm. My dad still takes care of the goats, and he milks them, and, he's the vet and all that stuff. And he's got a hard job in itself. And then my mom's my number one soap maker. That's primarily what she does for me. Or if I ask her for some other things, she'll do that. So I'm very blessed. I have great parents that see the dream and want to be a part of it and help me achieve it. And then, I'll do things like events. I'll do promotion, advertisement, marketing, social media. I wear many hats, but I don't mean to keep rambling on, but that's kind of like in a nutshell, more or less, of what I do now.
I have to tell you, Zach, I love your soap. Because I have very sensitive skin. And so whenever I take a shower, that's the only soap I use.
No shit.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, because you said something and I literally was like, oh, okay. My mom's name is Milagros. So when you said Milagro, I was like, oh my God, anyways.
That's
the
awesome.
reason why that's so cool to me, I feel like this is like a sign, right? I have a passion project that I haven't started because I get into my mind of like, I analyze way too much before doing it, right?
Sure.
But in talking with my mom the other day, I was thinking, her and I were kind of joking, like, we should do this together. And so when you said Milagro was the name of the soap, I was like, oh my gosh, it's a sign. Anyways, besides that, let me get into the good question.
No worries.
I'm really curious. Okay. How did your mom how did she take it? Because you went from working in a store to then like, hey, let's do this thing that I'm assuming was just like a hobby for her. Was she making soap on her own just to kind of do it? And then it becomes a business.
Sure.
Out of that.
Yeah. So like I said, she's a homesteader. So like she has hobbies. She knows how to do a lot of different things, but a lot of things come natural to her because of our ancestors. Like my great grandmother up here in New Mexico, we have a rich culture here. And a lot of people get it twisted, but like she was called a curandera. So she was, a healer. A lot of people kind of get that twisted and say like, oh, she was a witch. Well, no, she just was an herbalist. She had an apothecary. So my mom has that inside of her genes, and I carry that on too. So my mom noticed she was really good at it really fast. And then the same for myself. So she was doing it just as a hobby. And then I had told her my idea. And I love my mom so much because she supports me a lot. My dad does as well. But my mom really understood, and like it clicked for her like naturally. So she was like, this is brilliant. Like we have to do it. So like right now, for instance, this last week, like she made a lot of soap. That's what she does. Like I said, so she loves doing it. It's very therapeutic for her. She doesn't mind doing it at all. So it wasn't really that difficult with my mom to get her on the train to do it. She always saw the vision, and she continues to see the vision because of all the blessings we've had from it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's pretty much that.
Yeah, I would imagine it would probably be fun to do this thing with your mom, right? Like it was something that you said that you were always kind of interested in starting your own business, and what better person to do it with than somebody you trust and love. So I think that's really cool. I'm also jealous. You have a soap? I want to get this. I'm getting the soap.
Oh, you have
Yeah,
to.
I'll get you some. Awesome.
No, you don't even have to. Like, I'm on it. I'm going to already look it up, don't you?
They're all awesome, and they all make your skin feel really good.
Which kind of leads into another question. How did you dive into learning about it? Was it just natural, like growing up, you kind of already knew, like treating your skin better? Or did you actually have to stop and apply yourself?
No, I had to stop and apply myself. A lot of my childhood, half of my childhood, I was homeschooled. So I've always liked learning. Always enjoyed educating myself. So, I really do. Like, I love learning. I try to learn something new every day. I am all about growth mindset. So when I had made my mind up, and I like to think that a lot of my dad instilled in myself, and then my ancestry with my dad's side, but being in sports really taught me to like have a lot of confidence and believe in yourself. It was that competitive edge. So not necessarily being competitive against others, but being a competitive against myself and realizing like, hey, I need to be better every day. So like with the learning of soap, it's all chemistry. It's a lot of chemistry. And I've never even took a chemistry class. So like showing people like you can do things, you can self-teach yourself, I mean, you just have to apply and keep doing it in practice. So what I did with that was I actually ended up buying a product similar to ours, but it wasn't goat milk. It's a really manly, I don't know if I can give that off or not, but I'll try to not because of copyright issues or things like that. But it's a manly bar of soap that is natural. And it's kind of goes around with like the man bear Bigfoot. I'm sure you've heard of him, but it's not, And so it was a good soap, I'm not gonna lie, like it was really different. And I loved that. I read everything about their website, like I read everything what was in their ingredients, like everything. I did so much research on this business and I took their bars and I tried them myself and they were really nice. And not to like bring them down or anything, because everybody's different. But like what I noticed with them was like that soap, I was paying like $10 and then shipping. And then like it would just like go through it would melt in so fast, like in a week. I was only using it in a week. So I was like, well, I want a soap that lasts longer than that. And I'm sure most people would like a soap that lasts longer than that. And then also what they do different is that most of their soap, they have some goat milk soap, but most of their soaps have water in it, which most soaps carry water with a bunch of other stuff, but it's water soluble. So it makes sense, right? Like you put it underwater, it'll melt fairly fast. So with ours, since we use goat milk as our base oil, we don't use water in our soap. So it's fat soluble. So it's more dense than water. So, I mean, it just melts a lot slower. So that's kind of what I learned with that was like learning how to make soap. What are the processes called? What are the correct terms like saponification, things like that, which is pretty much soap turning into soap with the chemical sodium hydroxide, which is there's no longer any of that left once you have soap because that's the byproduct. I like to tell folks like when you bake a cake, you use raw eggs. So when you have a cake baked, is a raw egg left? No, you have the byproduct, which is cake. So it's the same thing for soap. And then just learning again, getting more hands-on with my mom, like I read a lot of stuff, but it was getting hands-on and actually putting skin in the game and doing it over and over. I remember we would only do like maybe a dozen bars at a time. But I remember at that time we were doing like 3-4 batches in one day because we were just like so driven and we were just so excited and we were like, this is so great. Let's just keep doing it. And it was funny because my mom was using like very small, like 4-ounce bottles of essential oils at the time, and they would go so fast. So, I mean, we've upgraded since then, but that's what we did. Yeah.
That's cool. Do you have siblings?
I have one younger brother.
I was going to say, I have an older brother, but I would totally joke with him at that point, be like, I'm mom's favorite. I spent all this time with mom. I'm her favorite now.
Nice. Really nice. So like when all this was going down during COVID, like how was your mental health? Because a lot of shit was going on during that time, right? You're trying to start a new business. You're finding out that you're going to lose your job. And now everybody's stuck in home. And I just want to know, like, how did you keep from like losing your mind every day?
I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be a forever thing. So I like to watch and like I said, I educate and I analyze everything. I'm an empath. So like I can feel a lot of things and sense a lot of stuff, and then I take it for what I'm getting. And that was really what I did. And then what I did too was back then I was exercising a lot because I mean, that's what kind of was my outlet. Like I'd go for runs, lift weights. Like I would just keep myself busy, and I hadn't have time to really think about like, oh man, what's going to happen? Like the only thing that was stressful during that time, which is pretty intense, and I'm going to get to that now, is during October of 2020 that was when I lost that job. We closed, but I was also making soap. My plan was like, okay, I'm going to launch this business in 21, but that did not happen because my wife and I found out we were expecting, which was great, which is our first son. We were excited and we conceived in October. But then in December, my wife and I both got COVID pretty bad. And what was scary with that is we would further to come on 2021 is with our son is since my wife got COVID in her first trimester, and it's happened to a lot of different women. So we sympathize with them is that it impacts the placenta growth. So since she got COVID, the placenta never fully developed. It stayed at a pretty small size, like equivalent to like a small water balloon. And so 2020, we're like doing good. Everything's fine. And then at the end of 2020, our lease was up and we were living in an amazing little casita outside of Santa Fe, like out in the wilderness. Like I'd see roadrunners and wildlife out where I live because I was used to living rural. Like that's just kind of who I am, So that comes a long ways when you don't have a lot of distractions. So it was good for my mental health. But 2021 was probably one of the hardest years I've ever have had. So kind of going along with what you're asking is it wasn't until 2021 is where me and my wife went through some difficulties because our lease was up and we knew that we were having a kid and the little house we were living in was like only 915 square feet. So we're like, well, we got to actually buy a house. And the housing market, thankfully, was good at that time. But what was frustrating was every time we'd find a house, like it was snatched like quickly. So it was just really hard because we were like, well, we had to move to Albuquerque and live in a single wide trailer in a really rough area. And it was pretty brutal. And my wife and I were really doubting a lot of stuff. Like, how could we have left? We were in this peaceful place? Like, this isn't our home. Like, how long are we going to have to wait? Granted, like, it was only like 4 months, but it was like the longest 4 months of our life because we were expecting, my wife was getting closer to giving birth. I mean, I think it was, April is when we moved from Albuquerque. We found our house now in Los Lunas. So I'm getting to the hard part, which was already kind of difficult for us, but we went for a normal, not sonogram, ultrasound.
Yeah.
And we went one day on a normal ultrasound. Everything was checking fine. And then all of a sudden it was June 1st, June 1st, 2021. We go for an ultrasound. Thankfully, we just got our house, but we haven't fully unpacked. We get there to the hospital and they're like, yeah, your son's heart rate is destatting. So he's not getting enough oxygen and he's having to work pretty hard with we were like, what? Okay. So they're like, well, I'm going to let you know, like there's a good chance he might be coming out today. So that was like, what? He wasn't due till July 16th. This was June 1st. So a month and a half, he was born 7 weeks early. So he was premature. So he came out later that night. My wife had to have an emergency C-section right prior to midnight of June 1st. Long night. Had our son, came out healthy. It was only 3 pounds, 13 ounces, very small. Poor guy. He had to have a feeding tube. He had to have a oxygen, for a while, even brought him home with that. And what would be the hardest battle I've ever faced was during that time. And my son had to be in the NICU for a whole month. So my wife and I would have to come home every night and we'd stay as long as we could until we couldn't stay up anymore because we were still working. I had a part-time job at that time. So I wasn't doing soap making at all. I ended up having to get a part-time job, which was contact tracing through the state. And I was able to do that remotely, thankfully, because it was a bad position we were in. But we would have to go home and without our son for a month, so anybody that's had a kid in the NICU and you can't take your son or your daughter home, I can tell you already that is like the hardest pain ever. So yeah, that was really tough. And then seeing the way he was, having been hooked up and like having the feeding tube and stuff like that was hard. And then get this, what's even harder is when you need your family and you need friends and support more, guess what? They can't go in the hospital. So
Yeah.
you're stuck. You're alone. That was definitely, that's kind of going off of the question, but like 2020 wasn't so hard. 2021 was the hard year, was when I started enduring a lot of that stuff.
What helped you through that?
I had been through a lot growing up, in prior years of my younger adult life, and just remembering how far I had already come, just constantly reminding myself of how far I came from back of my younger days and how hard those days were. And just reminding myself like it could always be worse and telling myself it can always be worse. I'm still blessed. My son's okay. He's alive. My wife's okay. She's alive. I'm alive. My family's healthy. Just reminding myself of like the good stuff, the blessings really is what helped me. And then prayer. I'm real spiritual with that, and just pray, a lot of prayer just to help me and to give me the strength that I needed. And not just the strength for myself, but to be a good husband, supportive, to be a strong husband for my wife. Because a dad only knows so much. I could only imagine being a mom and like you're carrying this person and not being able to take them. Like I couldn't even imagine. So that's mainly what I held on to, is just going back on how far I came, and then just prayer.
Did the hospital have like any social workers or anybody you guys could talk to? Because like you said, it was in the height of COVID and like nothing was available to anybody.
Yeah, that's a great question. There were social workers, but guess what? Like we never got one, which was weird and odd, but it was kind of like a period where, I'm starting to kind of realize a lot of stuff like the older I get, and like during the times of hard times, you're always like questioning everything. Like, why is this happening to me? Or why is this happening to us? But I felt like it had to be that way for a reason. We didn't get one, it would have helped. I'm saying it wouldn't have helped, but it would have. But I feel like right now, looking back on it, that we just had to be alone. Like we had to be alone with me, my wife, and our son to learn to like be strong for each other, and to know that it's just sometimes it might just be you three. It might just be, and just learning that without having any outside help, which it's hard. But sometimes what I've learned about life and pain is sometimes pain's essential. Pain is good for us as much as it might not be at all times, but sometimes it is, and it makes us better, makes us grow. And I kind of feel like that was really why we had to go through being alone during that time.
Yeah. And maybe not so much why you had to do it, or I feel like if anything, it taught you that you already could do it and that you were already strong enough. I don't think, that you had to do it, right? Like you just could.
Yeah.
You're finding that faith in that in yourself already. I think that's pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I agree.
Well, I immediately go to the new parent questions. Like I think as a new parent, right? Like you're already like stressed out, that moment where you could bring your child home. I feel like it was probably amplified, right? Because it's during COVID. You haven't been able to bring them home for so long. And now finally that day hits. Did you still freak out like a new parent would? Like, holy shit, we can do this? They're trusting us to do this? Are they sure?
They gave me a little human. Now I need to take care of it.
Yeah. How was that? So you've proven you're strong enough. You can do it together. And now that payoff happens. You bring your baby home.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it was actually bittersweet, and not to say it wasn't good or not good. Of course, it was relief because it was like, yes, let's just go home. Let's go home.
Right.
Right. And we did do that. But again, that was like another trial that we had to figure out now, was because it was like, oh, well, he's underweight severely. So like he's got to eat. And anybody that's had a premature kid, It depends how far they are, but he was pretty far. Again, he was only 3 pounds. So like normally a normal sized baby, you feed them when they wake up, right? With our son, that wasn't the case. It was like you had to wake up every 2 hours to feed him, and you had to do it on the clock. So in a span of one night, my wife and I had probably been awake like 3 times each feeding our son. And granted, he's little. So, I mean, like, he's not going to be eating quickly. I mean, like, it would take him to drink, like, I think it was like 2 ounces of milk, and it would take him like almost an hour to drink.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, I'm just nodding, falling asleep while I'm feeding him, holding him, and my wife the same. And that was a whole other struggle too, because we just didn't have, I was like way on the negative of sleep and then working in the morning or during the day. So, yeah, it was good. But then figuring out like stuff like that, being a new parent, of course, I remember when we got home, like right away, like the first like minutes we got home, we put him on the kitchen table with his like, and we were cleaning him. And my wife was there, thankfully, but I like walked away, straight up just walked away. She's like, babe, you can't walk away.
Right.
It rolls over and falls. And I'm like, oh, that's actually when I was like, oh, whoa, okay. Like, this is real.
It's that new parent realization. You're like, oh, this is a life now. like literally, right? Like keep them alive. That's all you.
It's true. It's true.
This is not the doll we've been playing with. This is real life.
It's just like that moment where it all comes together and like everything makes sense again. And you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it just comes, and I remember from that moment, yeah, like I said, it hit me, and it was like, I'm there, I am a parent, I am a dad. So it's time to get going. And it's been great since, there's been a hard time with that, but I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't have my son, so it makes me a better person, and I could never imagine my life without my son. And I've always asked, like, how could I have grown up without this person in my life? It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's beauty in that. Like when we go through something so difficult, it's almost like you're learning just how strong you are. And then more happens. And you're like, fuck, I just learned how strong I was because of this experience. But now I have to get through something harder. And you continue to push through and you continue to push through. And there's just beauty in finding a moment of peace and looking back at how far you've come. Because you can continue to do that throughout life. Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember kind of distinctly that I was laying in our room and we were just like kind of relaxing, watching TV. And this was probably about 3 months after he had been born. So 1 month he was in the NICU, and then the next 2 we were getting up every night for like 2 months and every hour of the night. And we finally got to the point where he was like averaging out what he could be. And I remember like laying there and just saying like, I think we'd made it. I think we're through this storm. Like, thank God. I think we're through it. But part of you, I don't know if it's doubt, but like part of you is like,
yeah,
but what if something, and I hate to say that, but sometimes you're like, is something else going to come? Like, is something else,
When will the shoe drop? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, but no, luckily it was smooth. It's been good.
And your between you and your wife, like, I'm sure you both had like mental struggles, like when you were going through that. Did you guys help each other to heal and, try and just make it through another day? Because I know what it's like to be sleep deprived and, having to care for. Now, I don't know what it's like to care for another child because I don't have children. I have 8 cats instead. But I can only imagine like the struggles that your internal struggles, but then just like expressing that to each other and just making sure that you could make it to like the next hour, the next day, the next week without like completely losing hope. So I'm happy that your son's going to make it to 3 in just a couple of weeks. So
thank you. Yeah, I would say during that time, like if it was physically like a physical problem, like again being tired, sometimes we would do another feeding. So it'd be like, hey, you know what? I got this one. Just go back to sleep. And then we would just kind of take turns with that. As a emotional standpoint, it was communicating and talking to each other. Me and my wife are really good at that. thankfully, as we communicate pretty well and tell each other how we're feeling. If we're not telling each other how we're feeling, we can always like understand like, oh, they're stressed, or, we can just read off of each other because we've been together for a while now. But communication, that's always the number one, is communicate and tell each other how you're feeling. Like if you're even just saying, you know what, I feel defeated. I don't feel good. I don't have any confidence right now. And just expressing those feelings just helps in itself to get out. But like my wife is great. She, like I said, she listened to me and helped me. And I did the same thing back for her. So was it always, peaches and cream? No. I mean, we're human. So there were times that we would get frustrated at each other or frustrated at the problem and, maybe have a little bit of a bickering moment or something like that, but not too bad. It was more of like, again, we had just went through something really hard together. So it was like, we knew that like none of us had it easy. So especially her, I mean, like she's the one that had to have, the C-section stuff. So, I went through the ride and had a hard time, but not like the mom, so I knew that part of me was like, again, it's just like how I was raised, I was kind of raised old school in that sense. And it's not a bad thing either. It was more of like, I got to be the man, I got to be a husband, and like, my feelings matter. But at the end of the day, like, I want my wife to be okay. Because if my wife, it's just like the true saying, like, if she's happy, you're going to be happy. And it's true. I mean, I can't take that any other way. Like if my wife's happy, then I'm happy. And I really genuinely mean that, because then it means that we're doing something right.
Yeah. That is like maturity, right? Like that is realizing you love and respect this person that you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with. And when you understand what that means and you're mature enough to fill those shoes, you step up and you do things to help each other. And I think that's a healthy relationship, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. It is.
Well, where can our listeners find more about you and your soap and your company? Do you ship also to Georgia?
Yeah, no, good question. So first and foremost, if you just want to email me, we have email at Milagro, Milagro, Goat Farm, and then at gmail.com. And then, so if like you just want to shoot us an email, that's where you can do that. If you want to kind of see some pictures and see some things of what we do, social media is a good way to go. Our number one platform at the time is Instagram. So just Milagro Goat Farm again. You can find us there. You'll see my mom, my dad, my brother, my wife, my son, me, goats, how you make soap, me making soap, like you name it. I do some pretty funny skits once in a while too, just to kind of lighten it up, put myself out there. And then of course, like Facebook, a little bit of Pinterest. I just started our YouTube channel. I have a lot of YouTube short, but I have like 3 episodes on YouTube. So trying to get that going. So if you want to know a little bit more what we do and why we do it, that's a good place to go, because it kind of gives you a short description and me speaking of why we do it and why we created it. So, and then also lastly, if you want to buy some soap, you can go to milagrogoatfarm.org and it'll show you all our soaps. And we just had a release yesterday, which is our spring summer soap. It's an awesome soap. It's called Meteorite. So if you want to blast away grime and you want to get rid of like the blackheads, the oily skin, that's a soap that you'll definitely need. And it's a good one. It's very unique.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you, Zach,
for having me.
Awesome.
What a great conversation. Thank you so much. And
I know.
I'm super excited. I know you're excited to be new daddy number 2 soon.
Oh yeah, very excited. Nervous, but excited.
You got
I know it's gonna be a life changer again. So hey, that's what life's about, right? And just keep going, and just if you're not doing it, you're not living, right? So I'm really happy for you guys. I want to share, like what I've seen, all the growth that you guys have been doing is pretty remarkable. It's not shocking to me. It's really not with G-Rex. G-Rex runs like your social, right? More of anything.
She does everything. She is the queen of it all.
So it's not surprising. Really, it's not. When I interviewed back in February and I saw the way you guys were growing, I was like, it's just the beginning. So I know you guys are very humble in where you are, but I'm going to let you know already, like, you better buckle up because
Oh shit.
yeah, you guys are headed there. You really are headed there, but it's because it's what you were meant to do. So
Thank you,
whenever
Zach.
you have those doubts, just know it was meant for. If you wouldn't come this far, to just come this far. So
That is,
It is very
absolutely.
humbling and surreal at the same time. We were just talking about how crazy all of this is.
Yeah.
It's gonna keep blowing your mind.
Whew, sweaty palms again. Sweaty palms.
Yeah, absolutely. It has that effect for sure, but you won't know until you put yourself out there. Oh, it's gonna be you. There's gonna be a moment where you're gonna be booked for probably years, to be honest. Like because you guys have been around for what, a year and a half, 2 years now, almost. Something like that.
Just hit a year.
Just past a year.
Just a year in February.
Yeah, see, I mean, like you have, like, I mean, and I'm not saying this to shoot you down at all. I'm just saying, like, you guys are still babies. You're barely starting to walk, and now you got like all this. You got interviews. You're just not gonna have. There's gonna be a time, and you're seeing that now already, where before you're having to go and look for people or go and ask, right? Whereas you're gonna get so big, and you're probably already doing this to where like you're going to have them come to you. And when that happens, that's huge. That is massive for a small business because it's a small business. You know what I mean? Like the podcast, but it's a business in itself. So you're going to have folks that are just going to come to you. And when you start having that, which you're already having, you're doing something right and you know that you're on the right path. When stuff just opens and freely comes and it's not like against the grain, that's when you're doing something right and you're on the right path. So I can definitely see that happening. Sounds good.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm G-Rex.
And I'm Dirty Skittles.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. We'd love to listen to your feedback.
We can't do this without you guys. It's okay to be not okay. Just make sure you're talking to someone.